Hi, I'm Cole Onsen. This is Diary of a Screen Actor. Today, I'm joined by Kara White, who I know from filming a really awesome project this last spring called The Resistance. The Resistance is about how a small group of British SOE agents try to outwit the Germans in World War II. Kara is a director, producer, and writer, and she specializes in one of my favorite things, which is period pieces, specifically World War II era, a lot of flight-related things, a lot of true stories about women that have gone untold for a long time. So please help me welcome Kara White.
Excellent. Yeah.
All right. Welcome, Kara. I've got Kara White with me today. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Would you mind telling us who you are, what you do, where you're from?
So my name is Kara White. I used to be Kara Martinelli many years ago, so I have some credits under that as well. I have been in the film business for, let's say, 20 years. I started out in New York City as an assistant editor, and then I worked my way up to a post producer, and I lived there for like 5 years, and I did lots of cable network shows. So I bounced around as a freelancer, and then I had some permanent jobs there. And I came back to Ohio. Gosh, what year was that? 2009. And I started out again because I didn't know what to do in Cleveland, Ohio, coming from New York City. So,
and you're from New York City?
I'm from Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said that and I missed it.
No, I don't. I came back to Ohio from New York City. But yeah, I grew up in Ohio, in New Philadelphia, which is south of Cleveland. And so I came back and I met my husband, and he had his own production company doing documentary films. And I saw his website for Hemlock Films that had just a big airplane on the front. And I was like, oh, I love airplanes. Like, what is this? So I contacted him and I was like, if you ever need help on anything for your aviation documentaries, I want to help. And then we went on our first date the next day.
He's like, I got one.
Right?
That's awesome.
So then I started producing documentaries with him, and then eventually started directing those documentaries, and then now directing narrative and commercial. So that's kind of the long and short of it, but I've definitely done more than that. And I also freelance as in the art department as Set Dec occasionally, although I haven't done that for years. So
okay. Cool. I feel like I heard about you through the grapevine about your crew work first. When I auditioned for your film, and then people were like, oh yeah, I know Kara because she's done crew. Like, yeah. So you've been around.
I've been around.
What was your initial interest in film?
So I went to school. I went to film school. And I grew up watching movies. My grandpa taped because it was all VHS. Had all the movie channels, taped all the movies for us. So we had like bookcases of VHS tapes to choose from as kids. And we made a binder catalog of alphabetical, so you could find the movie you needed. Nice. We have very nerdy children. But I was very into movies and stories. And as I got older and went to in high school and college, I spent my grandpa was my best friend. So we spent a lot of time together, and we watched Turner Classic a lot. So I kind of fell in love with the like old black and white movies is kind of where my heart lives. So that's where my passion came from for it. And then I kind of was going to school and I was like, I want to be an archaeologist, or I want to make movies. And then I was like, science is hard.
Yeah. And archaeology is so like, archaeology and paleontology, like there's so much like sifting, you know.
But I love that. I love doing that. I actually volunteer in the paleontology department at the Natural History Museum, and I clean
Yeah.
dinosaur bones.
Oh my gosh. I did that in high school, and I'm trying to think, Dr. Ryan.
Okay.
Do you
Yeah.
know him from Canada? He's Canadian.
Yeah. He retired
Oh, did
a
he?
couple years ago, or not retired. He got another job a couple years ago. But yeah,
Okay,
and
yeah. We all went to Mongolia together.
that's awesome.
I was 15. It was
That's
quite the
amazing.
excursion.
I
I'm
want to go to Mongolia.
It was really something else.
Mhm.
I'll tell you, like we spent some time in Ulaanbaatar, and like then we also went out into the Gobi for a couple weeks. And, like
That's amazing.
we were, we had to take a plane like to get there, and then we're
Mhm.
bouncing over the desert, in they called them Soviet civilian ambulances, and you're like bouncing for hours. Yeah. I just, whenever
I
anybody
love it.
mentions paleontology or archaeology, I'm like, that is
Oh my
hard
God.
work. Okay.
It's if you're going to Mongolia.
We found stuff. We
That's
definitely
awesome.
did. It's
Yeah.
just like, if ever I had an interest in my mind of that being what I wanted to do, it was like,
Pushed it out.
I think I've ticked that box.
Yeah. I don't think you're alone, because there's a lot of the Case Western students volunteer as well. And
Oh.
there was a gal who came in, and we were chatting, and we're like, so field work, and she's like, I've done it. No. I will be in the lab. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I can
So
do
you
that.
said no to archaeology, so you went and did film instead.
Yes, ma'am. And it was me going from a tiny town in New Philadelphia with no guidance in any shape or form, random dart throw at Bowling Green State University because I had a film studies program. I was like, that's where I'm gonna go. And then I transferred I only did 2 years there, and I transferred to the Art Institute in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So I did 4 years and got a 2-year degree because nothing transferred. But it doesn't matter because nobody ever looks or asks or cares. So
it's interesting, like just talking, the more I learn, the more sets I've been on, I've been talking to a lot more different people, like, okay, how does sound work? How does this work? How does that work? And it seems like for directing and writing, just seems like there's so many specific things to learn. Like you can go to, maybe, do you think it's the more like academic minded people who are like, I love to study, I love class, who end up in film school, versus directors who are like, I want to just kind of like grow and figure it out as I go? Like, what's your thought there?
hello.
Frozen. Did you
Sorry.
receive that? Oh, are you there?
I am.
Okay. Did you hear any of the question?
I heard part of it, but I didn't hear the actual question.
Oh,
I heard it leading up to
you heard the lead in. So cutting to the chase, I guess I was curious of your thoughts of like film school versus not film school. With acting, there's always like the actors who like went to school for acting versus like just got into it and maybe took acting classes. Okay, there you are.
Okay.
I see you moving.
One more time. So the value of going to film school versus not film school.
Yeah, kind of like value of going to acting school versus just like figuring it out and like gaining experience and taking classes. What's your thought?
I think it's valuable to go. I guess my comment was more that nobody asks, or most of the time no one's asking to see my resume, and everybody's just looking at my previous work. Or that nobody's ever asked where I went to school. But having that chance to go to film school, I think absolutely is valuable to learn the hands-on, all the crew positions, the elements, kind of like what we did with Tri-C, I think is super invaluable just to getting you in the door of understanding how a film set works. And then you have to do film studies. Like you have to take theory. Otherwise, if you're interested in writing or directing, you won't understand how any of it works. So like I don't understand when we have PAs or interns who are like, what's that? my husband also works in the industry, and he's had kids who they've been talking about movies like, like in Lawrence of Arabia. And he's like, Lawrence of what? It's like, just, like you don't have to know everything and watch everything, but I think there is value to having a degree, knowing the history, how to tell a story, why you do certain things you do, what the rules are, so that you can break them. So, I mean, I think it's invaluable to do that. I'm not saying you have to, but like, it definitely helps.
Well, and does that knowledge of like how to set up a shot, and like the 180 thing, I'm still learning about like breaking this line. I've just been overhearing it, and I keep asking people
Yeah.
like, what's that? And like just like gleaning information from different places.
Yeah.
And like so having a knowledge of those like physical or like cinematography elements,
Yeah.
does that inform your writing?
To some degree. I mean, so we always go at it like, just write the story you want to do and don't worry about your limitations. Be like, and then like, write it all. And then once that budget's in place, that's going to dictate what you can do. So creatively, I try not to think about that. But even though, because I also produce, that I understand what the reality of things. So I try to like write around that, and then I get yelled at because I'm writing around that. Because everyone's like, why didn't you do this? And I'm like, because I knew we couldn't do it. But it does have a value. I think it's more not necessarily in writing it, but directing and producing, knowing what everybody's job is, what everybody needs from you, and how you can accommodate them.
Okay. So one question, I have a vague idea of like technically what a producer does and is. Would you mind giving your comprehensive definition?
Yeah. So a producer's kind of like when you watch the Oscars, Best Picture, the people who are accepting are the producers, among the many others who are up there. But they're the boss. They're in charge of the entire vision. They're hiring the director. They're hiring all the key crew positions. And sorry, my phone's going off. So they're essentially, you're in charge of everything and creatively, and you get creative input. It's a little 50, like 50 creative, 50 the boring behind the scenes office, raising money, budgeting, boring stuff. So you're kind of a little in both worlds. But I think the nice thing is that you're able to be in charge of what you want. So you can work with everybody to shape your story, and you work together, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. So, and I'm not saying lose like a bad way, but like sometimes you're like, yeah, okay, like we're going to go this direction this time instead of that direction. But
okay.
I think directing is much more fun than producing.
I have never met anybody so far who says that they like producing. I just interviewed somebody who said, I would direct all day, I would act all day, or maybe know what he said. He said, I would direct for free, I would act for free, I would not produce for free.
Oh no. It's only because it's so time consuming, I think. And it's like, you're always thinking about it, and you're not as creative as the other people. Like I think it's that I would prefer not to do it because I don't like dealing with the people, office hiring, all that, the actual office work part of it. Like I don't mind doing it, and I'm pretty okay at doing that part, but that's not fun. So some of it's fun, some of it's not. It definitely takes a certain type of person who's really loves doing that. But it's just like I always say, I'm always like, I want to either be the boss, I want to be in charge of everything, or I want to have no responsibility and have somebody to tell me what to do all day. And I'm like, yep, got it, do it.
Yeah. I mean, at least in this industry, you can go back and forth, I suppose.
Yeah.
Maybe not on one project, but you could do one
No.
project where you're producing, one project where you're like, I'm crew now. I'm just holding this now.
It is a weird line to walk. My husband is the same way, because for those of you who don't know him, I know you do. But he is also a producer slash director with our company, but he does camera, Steadicam, and cinematography for freelance. So Ohio is a weird region where like you can do multiple things, but it puts us in two different categories. So like years ago when I would do Set Dec, and I still get calls to do Set Dec.
Set Dec, let's define that.
So that is the art department covers a lot of things. And Set Dec is a division of the art department, and it is our department is in charge of all the pieces on the set. So we are moving, decorating, organizing, storing. Sometimes I'm like, we're glorified movers, and then everybody's like, we're a little bit more than that because we are decorating for the scene.
Okay. So that is like physical elements. Does that include props? Does that include lighting?
It does not include props or lighting. Props are different. Anything somebody holds is a prop.
Okay. So anything anybody holds is a prop. Any of the like, so like in the cafe scene in The Resistance, all of the like little shelf things that were like behind the bar, that's set, that's not props, right?
That is sets. And if I were doing set, I would have packed all of those from somewhere in a warehouse because my boss would have bought them. Or not my boss, but the buyer would have bought the stuff.
Okay.
And then one of the bosses is picking it out. Another boss is telling me what to do. And then I would take it. And then they're like, here's all the pieces and parts, put it together. And then it's kind of like, I feel like I move a house every day and have to like put everything in a spot, like you're like, now where do we put this? So I put the chair in the corner.
One thing that's so interesting about this industry is just like the hierarchy and like the chain of command and the chain of jobs, and just being on sets, especially big sets, just seeing all these, it's like an anthill or a beehive where everybody has their function, and it's a lot. It's incredible.
Yeah, it is very much like we run very much like the military, where it's top down. Like when I'm in that position, I'm only answering to the person who's directly above me. Like I mentioned, I have several bosses, but they're not technically in charge of me. So sometimes it can get a little confusing if people are telling you different things because they all have a different function. And I don't want to get into it because it'll take forever because everyone has a different, there's a lot of people that all are doing something different. But yeah, it is.
And for actors, and they all say like, when you get on big sets, as the actor, like you talk to this person, this is the only person you tell you're going to the bathroom, or don't talk to anybody else. They're busy.
Yeah, they are busy. I'm actually reading a book about the making of Shaun of the Dead. And that was someone's comment in there that they had interviewed. They were an extra as a zombie and they were friends with Edgar Wright. And they were like, I learned something because I didn't work in the film industry yet. They were like, I learned that you don't talk to the director. It's not that he's mad at me. He's just focusing and he's trying to direct a fucking film.
And the long hours. Yeah.
Right.
Long hours, lots of stress, lots of money being thrown around. It's really intense.
It can be really intense and it can be really fun. There are days that I hate my job and there's days that I love my job. The loving outweighs the hating. Otherwise I would have quit it a long time ago. I've definitely quit in certain positions where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I can't be this person anymore. So you got to find your spot and love it, and grow from there. And you can always change. I've changed positions many times in the 20 years where I'm like, I'm going to do that now. Cause I think the reason I do Set Dec is I got really fed up with, I was producing / production coordinating.
Okay.
And I was like,
what did that involve? Like, what were some of your like tasks or expectations of that job?
Yeah. Coordinating is kind of, you're in charge. It's basically office work, and you are making sure that there's crew, people have their information. Like on the stuff I would do, it was like call sheets, like all the boring stuff. That's all office work. And because I did a lot of commercials, and I just got tired of working for out of towners, where I was like, I worked long hours and I didn't get overtime. And I didn't really love what I was doing. Because you're not on set, you're just in an office somewhere, filling out paperwork essentially.
Were you
And
in charge of like contracts as well, making sure like NDAs got signed?
I didn't have to
As
do, as
far
a
as
coordinator, I didn't have to do that. It was like, just like, are they getting lunch? Are they, is everyone filling out their time cards? Are, not even like exciting stuff. It's like
yeah.
filling out spreadsheets. And I just was like, I can't do this anymore. It was making me miserable. So I looked over and I was like, who looks like they're having fun? Art department. I want to do sets. And that was kind of it. And then tried making that changeover where it was like, no more. I would have to tell people who were calling me for production coordinating. I'm like, I don't do that anymore. I still get calls for coordinating. I'm like, not as often, but I'm like, so it's a slow changeover sometimes because you have to wait for people to understand to call you for that position that you want. So
Okay.
it's possible to switch. Just, you have to be comfortable with maybe not working right away or working as often.
Interesting. I've considered like maybe checking out crew, just like
Yeah.
I've done a teeny tiny little bit of casting, extras casting, just
Yeah.
like helping out locally a little bit, just like like a handful of volunteer hours last summer. And I got a taste of what that looks like. I think that's a bit different than principals casting.
Yeah.
Because we weren't auditioning anybody. We were looking at pictures, organizing
Gotcha.
pictures, lookbook type things.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. Do you think that it is super, super valuable for actors to do some crew stuff? See what
Um,
that's like, or is it not worth it to
I
like,
don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, I think it definitely gets you on-set experience so you can understand what's happening around you. So it's not overwhelming. And for me personally, I know the more sets I'm on. When I first started, like my first set, I was like, oh my, like I felt super uncomfortable because I wasn't quite sure what was happening. Um, so I think the more you experience it and the more you learn who does what, it makes you feel more comfortable. So I guess that's more of a personal preference. If you're like, I solely want to focus on acting and like I don't want to do any of that other stuff, or if you're like, I'm really interested in knowing how the machine works, so that way when I'm on set, I know who to talk. It definitely helps, even just with knowing the lingo of stuff, is beneficial because it just helps I could get into the stories of people not knowing what you're talking about because there's so much slang. People are like,
well, and you do hear different things. You hear sound is speeding, camera. I've heard camera speeding. I've heard
yeah,
camera rolling. It's like, and then I hear people say those things and then settling.
yeah,
And some they don't say settling.
yep,
And there's action for this person, action for that person, action
yep,
for background. Um, there's a lot. There's a
yeah.
lot. So
There's a lot, and we did a shoot with the French a long time ago, and they say turnover instead of.
what does turnover mean?
I mean speeding.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Good to know. Did you always have an interest in writing and directing?
Yeah. So yes. When I went to film school, my class only had 4 women in it. And my first class, when I went to Bowling Green, only had one other female in it. So her and I are friends because they're like, let's stick together. And then when I transferred to the Art Institute, my class for that, there were 4 of us. And we all worked together because it was like, you just did. But I always had an interest in like, everybody's always like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And you're like, I don't make movies. Like, because you don't know at that stage what all the positions do and what all of that means. So you're kind of like, I don't know, I'm figuring it out. And like, you kind of have an interest in different departments as you're learning it, but I really didn't know. But I always was like, growing in high school, I was like, I want to be a director. I want to write, and I would write scripts with my friends. And I definitely wanted to do that. But by the time like going through school, I was like, the realization hit, there's not a directors that look like me. Like what I was imagining myself as, I didn't see it anywhere. Like all the directors, like people are like, who do you like for directors? And I'm like, they're all dudes. And it's not because women, like I don't have women directors that I like. They don't just have not had the chance. So until recently, there's been lots more, but you're not exposed to them. So
yeah, I just made a list the other day
mhm,
of directors I'd love to work with
mhm.
and actors I'd love to work with.
Yeah.
And, most people on my actor list are female, but and some I'm like, I should put some men on here, but I'm like,
That's fine.
but like the directors,
Mhm,
I was like, there was like off the top of my head, there was at least one woman.
yeah.
Maybe there were a couple, but it was like all the ones that I thought of initially, they're like older men. And I'm like, that's fine, but like, where are the women?
Yeah. And
So,
I mean, as myself who loves to tell stories about women from history, I feel this compelling need to be like, I want to, like I want to represent and have women directors that I talk about all the time. And I do have them that I like. But they just haven't been around as long. So you can be like, oh, you're talking more recent stuff. But like which there's some weird changeover that somebody needs to explain to me when it happened. But there was a ton of women directors, like in the 20s and 30s. Silent films had a ton of women directors and I think writers. And then for some reason, they flipped it. And then since then, it's, I think it's 7% or something. But I would kill to work with Olivia Wilde.
well, make a list.
Yeah.
Put on a list. A Harvard study a while ago, probably others have done it since to just back it up.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, a Harvard study showed ages ago, like, I think it was people who wrote down their goals, like
Mm-hmm.
physically wrote it down on a piece of paper. I mean, you're smiling, you've heard this, right? Like they're actually more likely to actually accomplish it. And
Yeah.
you better believe I got lots of lists.
I have multiple lists. I have a drawer
Of
of
lists.
all my ideas. I just shove it in the little drawer.
And speaking of ideas, I mean, you said you were super close to your grandpa. Is that where some of your interest in like World War II, wartime, historical period piece type stuff came from?
Yeah. I'm going to attribute everything that I am came from that man.
Oh.
In the nicest.
Bravo, grandpa.
He was just the best. He was just the best. He was like the nicest, best person ever. Like when you think of grandpa, like that's grandpa. He was just cool and fun to hang out with. Like
What was his name?
Richard Moore.
Richard Moore. You'll have to send me a picture so I can
Okay.
put it up.
I wrote a whole book about him. Well, I didn't write. I took his letters from World War II and that he wrote to my grandma and put that together in a book. So
That's cool. I have to find that later.
I will send you the Facebook page for it. That has all the photos of them.
Love.
But yeah, he is definitely the reason I'm into that. Because I think I want to say I knew in high school that he was in World War II as a tail gunner in B-24 in the Pacific. And I feel like he's mentioned that in high school, but I was like, blah. Do you know what I mean? Like, anyways. So when I was in college, I had to write a paper. And that paper was, you have to interview a friend of yours that was from another generation. And I'm like, I'm 18 years old. Do not have friends from another generation. And so I was like, I guess my grandpa's my friend. Like, so I went and interviewed him. And he is like, I don't know, I guess we'll talk about my time during the war. And I was like, what? So that's kind of when that opened up, that I knew that's what he did. And he had photo albums and scrapbooks. So he just like got all that out. And I just saw these photos and like fell in love with these photos because they're these beautiful black and white photos of them in the Pacific. It's literally like the ones he had were just him and his buddies, like literally living in the mud on
Oh, do
Okinawa.
you have those in the book?
I do. And I think they're on that site as well. But
Cool.
I don't know. I just started looking at more stuff and like reading more books, and I just loved it. So and then because I'm a nerd, I love like now I'm just really into historical stuff, but it's mostly World War II era, and it's because there's a million stories out there that you can tell. And I love telling. I'm more interested in writing stories about people who actually did something. And then I feel like I don't have to make anything up. Because it's like because when I try and make something up, it just feels so made up, where I'm like,
Okay.
would this happen? This feels weird. Like I feel like I'm playing. That makes
Okay.
sense.
I do love stories. I really feel like a lot of people, like if sometimes I'll be looking up, I love period pieces too. Sometimes I'll be looking up just information about cast or the director, or the writer, or whoever, about a piece that I like, and I know it's fiction,
Yeah.
but I will Google it, and you'll see, how it like puts the questions, like frequently asked questions.
Yeah.
A lot of people on a lot of those are curious, like, what is the truth behind this story? Is this true? Is any part of it true? Is it based on anybody? They love truth. I think we love storytelling is like the oldest human thing there is, but like I think people particularly love and become close to a story when they know that there's some element of truth to it.
I think so too. I think it makes you feel more connected to humanity or something. Where you're like, well, it's a real life person did that. And I'm the same way. I look up to see if things are, what part of it's true, if it's, because I want to know, because it's like sometimes you're like, some things sound so extraordinary that they can't be true. Where you're like, that couldn't have possibly happened. But that's why I love reading those books. So I love reading.
I can't wait to read. I can't wait to look at the book.
Yeah.
And read his letters. That also brings to mind the concept of film as an educational tool, not just documentary films, but the I guess the role of film and television in influencing social change or something, or educating, or remembering, or making a point, or asking a question. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of my favorite things that my husband always says, because we do a lot of these talks, and he's like, the only reason people know what Houston we have a problem is because of Apollo 13. So it's like there's just that it's just a great tool to be able to tell somebody that and he was just telling me a story. He looked up, I guess, Tom Hanks, after they did pre-screening, or the what do you call them, the screeners of the of Apollo 13 before it came out, to get audience reaction. And they were like, someone literally wrote on a card, this is all made up. It's too fantastical to have actually happened. None of this could have happened. And like everything in that movie, it happened, except for the fact that they did embellish the guys a bit, so they seemed more interesting.
That's so interesting. So interesting. So have you sort of established period pieces and like historically accurate drama or documentary films as your niche? Or
I would love if that were my niche. I mean, I've kind of, yes, that is what I typically tend to make. I'm right now we are in post-production for a documentary about Chinese missionaries at the turn of the century. So that is completely out of my wheelhouse, but we got hired to make that. So that's what I'm working on currently. Excellent. And but most of the time it is history based in aviation. And that's my passion and my husband's passion. And that's what we started with. And then we did all these documentaries on our own, and now people hire us to make them. So that was kind of the goal to get to that point.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. And
yeah,
like you're talking about like Rise Above.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the website. It's a beautiful website, very educational.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, the videos that you did, not just on like about the production, but also the interviewing and like it's so much, like the film is great. Thank you for sharing that with me, by the way, since I couldn't get access to it at the museum. I love the film, but I also just love the bits and pieces about the film. So like the whole experience of going on the website and exploring is super educational. So good job.
Thank you very much. That was Adam had that idea to do our behind the scenes for that. And I was like, yeah, all right. And then put my dumb goober face in front of the camera, which I hate.
You're silly.
Like, oh, okay, I gotta talk about this.
I think it's really good.
Thank you.
I love that. Well, and when I got cast in the Resistance, and even before I even auditioned, watching that and hearing you guys talk and learning about your casting process for Rise Above WASP, you know, just I don't know, it gave me confidence as an actor, like maybe I'll get picked.
Oh, I like it.
Based on just that. I don't know, it gave me some insight. Oftentimes when you audition for things, you don't get a ton of insight as to like the writer, director, their style. I mean, maybe if they're super well known, but like you gave us a little in if we looked. So
it is by far the most stressful part of being a director, or at least for me, because I hate having to pick people, not because I can't do it. I always know, I'm always like, I like that person, that's who I want. I don't like telling other people that they didn't get it. That's why I'm like, but can everybody have a part? It hurts my heart so much, which I'm like, can somebody else do it?
So when it comes to picking cast members, I mean, that is the director's job, but other people, producers, weigh in as well?
They do. It really depends who the final say is. If you've read or watched anything that they make that's like a making of, you'll see that struggle. And it really depends on who had. Ultimately, the producer is the one who can say yay or nay. The director can pick, but like I said, it is a compromise, and sometimes it's not. The director doesn't always get who they want. Sometimes the producer doesn't get who they want. So it's just, I think it's at that point you are making the argument for why your person is better, and why they make that product. Like if I were like, I want you to be in the movie, and somebody else was like, I want somebody else, and then I would go through and make my argument why you make the story better. So it's just, it becomes debate class.
Interesting. Well, and does it not come down sometimes to appearance, and like that person is like these two people playing opposite each other? Like if you pick this actor, they look really similar to this other one, and like maybe that's okay, but maybe you need that contrast too, right?
There's been, when we did Rise Above WASP, because of the format and the shortness of it, that we couldn't, the amount of narrative scenes in that documentary were so short that we couldn't establish those characters. So we had 3 main characters, and it's for children who are going to be watching this, and they have a 15-minute version that's even shorter, which I do not, it's not that I don't like it, the 30 minutes is much better. 15 minutes too short. It's just too short. But if you're watching it at that quick of a speed, nobody's getting names, nobody's interacting, like they're minorly interacting with each other, but nothing big is happening. So you need everybody to look very different. So on that one, there were people that I liked, but they looked similar. And you were like, all right, this is going to come down to like, I need a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead. It didn't need to be that extreme. It just kind of happened to be what we did. But yeah, you just couldn't, you didn't want to confuse the audience, especially because at a certain point they're in uniform. So you couldn't, it's the person in the blue dress.
Well, I noticed you guys, I don't know who chose hairstyles, if that was your hair and makeup artist, but you know, I was looking at the different hairstyles in Rise Above Wasp, and like this one's got hers kind of up and back. This one's got hers down a little bit more and curled a little bit differently. This one's got the little hairnet. I can't even say that word, like little bun thingy. Yeah, like I noticed that you guys did differentiate. So, you know, costume and hair and makeup did a really nice job.
Yeah, and I became very aware of that when we watched Dunkirk, if you've seen that.
Yeah.
Because I was confused halfway through the movie. I'm like, I thought that guy died. And it's like, no, that's a different actor. They just look alike. Like they all, because I was like, can somebody be wearing glasses? I don't know who's who, because they're all in the same outfit and have like the same haircut and the same color.
Well, which, you know, when it comes to uniformity and making a statement about that, like you could, if that was part of your story, like that could
totally
play into it, right? I mean,
totally.
but I will say as a viewer, it is challenging when there are like a couple people who look super similar, and I'm like having trouble following the story to begin with, maybe for other reasons. And I'm like, wait, which one's that? Is that guy's husband, or like that woman's brother? Like, I don't know is that the guy? No, that's somebody else.
No, I turned into an old person. I'm like, what? Who's this? It's really, and that's really the only movie I've caught that in where I got confused on who I was looking at. And it gets dark, you know, like it gets dark for a little bit and you're like, now I don't know what's happening. And it's for me, like I like the character. It's like I know there's a bigger story happening, but like I like the little character stories of each of these soldiers who are in it. So I'm like, well, now I don't know what his story is because I can't remember which one he is. Like, so something's happening to him. I'm like, wait, what happened to this guy? Who is this guy? So yeah, when we were doing that, it was a little bit of that and a little bit with the Resistance, because mostly everyone who auditioned kind of has a similar look and age. And so it was Jimmy and I would discuss, he's like, well, we'll figure it out. I was like, in this instance, I don't think anyone's going to get confused on who's who.
I feel like everyone's face was different enough, and you know, you made Claudette with the jewelry, made her quite specific, and you know, Andre looked quite different, and I had a hat. I'm the one with the hat, right? Like
you all do look different though. It's not, and it is a super deep narrative film where it is literally you guys in a room talking. So it's not like you're running around and then you're like, okay, now we're cutting to another scene and like, who's this? Like, which one were you again?
I can't wait to see it. I'm going to put up, well, you know, on this bit where we're kind of talking about the Resistance in particular, I'm going to put some pictures up, those stills that you sent me. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Just to kind of give a little sneak peek in that way.
Yeah. It's coming together really well. I'm very pleased. I'm excited to get going. So we're having someone in France currently recording the radio broadcast that they listen to at the beginning. So we'll see how that turns out. I've not heard of her or heard her stuff, but Jimmy recommended her. So let's see how that works.
He's in pretty deep with that stuff. So
he just spent 2 weeks in France doing the Band of Brothers tour. So
and he told me he's going back.
He's invited us to come along, and I don't think our schedule will work out. But if we were going to do it, it was going to be this May trip, and we just couldn't make it happen.
You could just ditch everything and just go for it.
Oh, right.
Or next year. You can go next year.
I'm going next year. I think I'd be ditching my vacation to do another vacation.
I mean,
right?
You never know. I wanted to ask about the Resistance and your inspiration for that story in particular. And I also wanted to ask if you have a preference at this particular moment in time, of course we can change our mind later, between documentary about like World War II stories, since that's your niche, or like narrative drama.
I 100% we would only be making narrative if we could afford it. But documentary is the poor man producer's ability to tell stories from history, because as we know, When it is period, it is much more expensive. So
And tell me, what are the elements, because I'm interested in making period piece stuff. What are the elements? What do I need to expect?
For making a period movie with budget,
Yeah.
literally everything you see on screen. So your costumes, your hair and makeup's not that big a deal because it's the same. It'd be the same anyhow. Your costumes, your sets, which gets complicated when you go exterior because those can be much. Then you got a lot more you got to change because even if you have old buildings, you still got to change and hide stuff that has been modernized. In our case, we like to do stuff with airplanes. So then we're talking vintage airplanes. And then we're talking, because why do you want to see a plane on the ground? You want to see it flying. So now you got to pay for the fuel, the pilots, and a second plane because you need something to film the said airplane that goes a particular speed. So if you're filming a warbird, nothing flies like a warbird. So you have to film from another warbird, which are not cheap to fly. So
Good to know.
Things like that.
Interesting. Well, and just like finding costume stuff, you know, like I troll the thrift stores quite often, and I find lots of really cool stuff. I'm like, oh, I could use this for this, I could use this for this, but like outfitting everyone in period specific garb that fits them, that looks nice on them color wise.
Yes. The sizing is the biggest issue with period clothing because they were much smaller.
I bet.
So I have skirts that were my grandmother's from the 50s and their waist was like this big. So I'm like, it doesn't even even at the smallest part of my waist, like not even close. So I had to get them altered. Like we had to cut them up and get them so I can wear them. I'm like, no way.
Yeah. So your inspiration for the Resistance, was that like one of those stories you have in your drawer from like a long time? You wanted to do something spy related, or how did you come across that particular story? Maybe you should tell people what the SOE agents did.
Yeah. So SOE is Special Operations Executive, which it's the British spies that are the precursor. I think they became MI6. Because the Americans also had, what were they called? We had our own secret service essentially, not secret service. We had our own CIA at the time, but it was not called CIA. So that was the precursor to CIA. Because there were also American women over there and men doing the same thing. I just particularly focused on the SOE because I was telling that particular story. But they were the spies during World War II who they would send to Nazi-occupied France to gain information. They were essentially there to gain information and get that back to the British so that they could do D-Day. Like that was the whole bit, is they were in there trying to figure out how they can invade France. So they're like trying to get like gun, like the I can't even think of the words now, where the guns were located all along the beach so that they could figure out how they could get in. And that's kind of the long and short of it, is they were there to get information to the British so they could beat the Nazis. I'm not sure if they went other countries or not, but that was like the main, this is my least, which is funny you ask if this was something I always wanted to do. This is like my least knowledgeable department in World War II. I just started reading books about these women spies. I got one that's called D-Day Girls, and that's where the inspiration for this one came, which was a bunch of different women who were there trying to get information for D-Day so they could invade for D-Day, and it's super fascinating. And then I read Heart of Hearts. Everybody's like, have you made your dream project? I'm like, yes, I did. It was the WASP movie. But my other dream project would be about this woman named Nancy Wake, who they called the White Mouse. And she was from Australia. She was technically British, but like, was she Australian British? Anyways, she was SOE and just amazing. So I read that book a long time ago and I was like, this woman is so cool. Like, I want to be her. Still working on that. I don't know how that's possible, but she's amazing. So that's, and then I read one about Virginia Hall, who is American, and she's the one who doesn't have a leg because she shot her leg off in a hunting accident. and then went to France. They sent her to France and she had this wooden leg. So they called her the woman with the wooden leg. And I think at some point she like had her teeth filed. So she looked, because she had to like start looking like an old beggar woman. So she went to the dentist and had her teeth fucked up. So they couldn't find her.
Talk about like really going hard.
Yeah. And then she had to like, they found her. She had to escape over the mountains to get to Spain, which I can't remember how long that was, with a wooden leg.
That sounds horrifying.
So I recommend looking into these ones, like any of them. I recommend, like all of them were like the biggest badass, where you're like, I can't, like if I were in that position, I'd be like, no, that's it. Like just kill me, kill me.
You know, it's pretty incredible. Like I looked into there was a book called Codename Lise, which is about a woman named Odette, which was,
I think that's where your character came from.
Super inspiring. I mean, this woman, her code name was Lise, and her real name was Odette, and she was French but married to a British man and had 3 daughters in England.
Yeah.
And when they approached her, you know, she felt very keen to do her part. And she left 3 little girls in England and went to France and really did some serious business. And she was tortured, and she just like watching her interviews were so emotional. Just how she, you know, as an older woman, because she survived, just talking about how she survived torture. And one of the things obviously would have been like, I had my daughters to go home to, but the other was like, they placed her in Paris, if I'm remembering correctly, on the top floor of a building in front of a window. And she was able to look out as they're torturing her, look out over the blue sky and the trees in the distance. And like, she was able to like transport herself into that space. And when she was in the hole, she was in solitary confinement for like months, 3 months or something ridiculous like that. She was able to persevere. She had been blind as a child, so being in the dark wasn't as scary. I mean, you know, with acting, we talk about how like life experience will inform your acting. Well, how about life experience informing your life?
I mean, well, to a certain extent, they were actors. These spies are they are living another life, deceiving everyone, besides the people in their network. So I mean, like they are acting. But I think that's actually who I kind of based your character on, was her. Because I was
honored to play her. I can't wait to see the final thing.
It's it'd be nice to do a longer version of that script. And that was sort of, I read that and I was like, I want to make a movie about these women, because I've always wanted to make something about Nancy Wake, and not a documentary, because I mean, that's fine, but I want to make like a narrative of her, because like you can talk about them, but I feel like so much more of those situations like come across much better if it's being shown to you as if it's happening.
Greater tension, just like longer to build. Ooh, I have a question. So do you share my passion for miniseries?
I do like miniseries.
Miniseries are so cool because they're like a dream, right? They're like they could be like a perfectionist's dream, right? Because you got longer to tell a story more thoroughly, more details, more storylines, more like mess to make, and more stuff to tidy up. And then at the end of a set number of episodes, be it 4 or 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever, you can trust as an audience member, as painful as it is, that the ending has tidied everything up. There's no like, will there be a second season? Like, like loose ends, cliffhangers. There's none of that. You're just like Queen's Gambit. Just, oh my God, the last line when she goes and she's sitting across from the man dressed in the white queen outfit, like the little old Russian man, like they do, they sit out there and they play chess. You know, the last thing, she looks at him and all she says is, Sigraim, like, let's play. It's like, oh, and that was it. And it tore me up, and it probably tore everybody else up too. But like,
Oh, I
So my
love,
question is,
yeah, I
will you
love
make
that.
a mini series?
I would love a miniseries. And I think that's like the answer to the telling the historical story, or telling a story from history, is that when you get that miniseries, you're able to like tell everybody's story properly, and delve into those details that you normally, if it were a movie, you're just like, no time. It's interesting, but cut it.
Right.
no,
Yeah.
no time for that. Um, but they've announced they're making a mini series about the WASP. I think Renee Zellweger is in it,
Awesome.
which I find a little weird for the person she's playing in history, but like, we'll see. I'm like, really? Uh, but yeah, I'm like, I can't, because that would be another dream project, would be able to tell their story in a mini series format, because they have, oh, there's so many good, just like the women's spies, there's so many good stories in there, and there's so many good moments. Like I just have these scenes, like, and I feel like that's how I do my documentaries as well. That's how I build around it. It's like I have a scene in my head where I'm like, oh my God. And we talked about this when we were filming The Resistance, where I'm like, I get really excited when we would do a shot, because I'm like, this is it. This is the thing I've written, or like I've been thinking about forever. This is my first idea. And I'm like, I just love that the shot's coming together. Like it's all happening. But yeah, I think, and I love those series that end like with her saying, let's play. I love that one final button of a line where you're like, oh, it just sums up everything. That's kind of the reason, I'm not going to spoil the movie, but the end of The Resistance, where Andrea has her line, and because I really originally did not write it that way. It was more me sitting around musing about their story. I love The Pacific, is probably one of my favorite miniseries ever, which is, I think, highly underrated, because people expected it to be like Band of Brothers, and it's just not. It is its own story, its own thing. And the whole thing is, like, it's about how horrible war is, and the horrible thing these people have gone through. And they do an episode at the end, which is also my absolute favorite stories, are when veterans come home and the readjustment to civilian life, because all the civilians expect them to be like, you're home, like it's fine, we're back.
Right. As if
They're
they
like,
hadn't changed and become a new person in that time.
yeah. And they're like, this is like another planet to me right now. Like, I need some time. So they did a whole, if you've not seen The Pacific, the whole last episode is dedicated to them coming home. And the last line in the series, I think the last line they say, it's not the last scene, because they have another scene. But the father of one of the main characters is like, leave him be. You have no idea what he's gone through. And like, that's it. I just love it.
Oh.
That's when you know something's really well written.
Like, chills hearing that. I'm definitely gonna look that one up. You did spark my memory. I have a tab I just checked on my computer, open to watch this mini series from 1945 called Mildred Pierce.
We were just watching the movie last night.
Were you? Would you recommend either the miniseries or the movie?
I have not seen the miniseries. We didn't watch, because it was on Turner Classic, so we just caught part of Mildred Pierce. But for the most part, you're watching going, when's Joan Crawford become Joan Crawford? Because she's not doing her bit until you get towards the end, where you're like, when do I see her?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Sometimes I'll watch the really old stuff, like looking for somebody's performance in particular.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm like really stoked, and other times I'm kind of like, oh,
yeah,
that was it. Like,
yeah, you can tell the ones that get phoned in a little.
I'm blanking on the name, but it was the one with Rita Hayworth, I think, that it is watched in Shawshank Redemption.
Oh,
Gilda, where she like flips her hair up and she goes, who, me, or whatever she says. That scene was quite early on in the film, and then the rest I was like,
oh, Gilda's not good.
Like that scene, like I feel like for Shawshank they pulled the best scene, and like hyped it up, but like then there was one, it was with Betty, it's All About Eve.
Oh, okay.
All About Eve with Betty Davis. Like that was fabulous. I loved that movie. Just her eyes, like,
oh, Betty Davis.
Know how she's like, so mad about Eve. Yeah.
She's
I thought
just
that
so
one was quite good. Are there any other projects that you take inspiration from or that you would recommend those of us who are interested in period pieces watch?
Yeah. So I mean, I sent you a list of some of them. Like, I have a dear place in my heart for Inglorious Bastards because I just love it. Just think it's really fun, even though none of it's true. I find it very entertaining. But for filmmaking style, I love when things get really crazy and weird. Even though that's not something I necessarily do in my own stuff. Because even just talking for the resistance to this and the students in the lectures, I was like, oh, I'm thinking for this shot, like I think of Sam Raimi. And then for this, I think of about Edgar Wright. And they're like, what are you making? I was like, well, I'm not doing that, but that's how when I'm writing it and thinking about it, that's where my brain goes. And then you're like, okay, like this isn't going to work for this piece. Like it just doesn't. So I really love that, like interesting ways, like the fast cutting, interesting ways to shoot things, but that definitely is not the way I do things or my style. So, but for period stuff, I just watch, like I said, I watch a ton of Turner Classic. I love, my favorite actress is Myrna Loy. I was like, I love her to death. And like, this is how you know I'm getting tired when I can't think of this stuff. Myrna Loy is my absolute favorite. Her face, she's just really good at making these like, she's really good at expressing little emotions on her face. And I just love it. Thin Man is my favorite. It's a whole series.
Okay.
The rest of them are not as good. The second one, it's okay. And then the rest are just like fall off the cliff. You can tell the studio is just like, make another one and they should have a baby. And you're like, oh, this is terrible. The first one is To Die For. We watch it every Christmas because it's set at Christmas.
Okay.
Adam and I are like, we very much want to be Nick and Nora Charles.
All right.
We're not that.
Pop it in the video here so people can see what it is. I'll definitely be checking it out myself.
Look at yes, it's so good. And my other favorite is The Best Years of Our Lives, which is kind of echoes back to what I said about telling the stories of veterans who come home. That was the best picture in 1945, 46. It's probably 46. But it's three guys coming back from World War II and dealing with their families. It's all, because I'm a nerd and I've looked all this up, the entire crew were veterans. So it's a really well made movie with a really good story. So yeah, I think those would be my favorites. I do love Saving Private Ryan for a newer, it's not even new, it came out in the 90s, like a newer period piece, but like for accuracy, like those guys, none of those guys that they cast for that the casting's all wrong. Like the guys are great, the cast is fantastic, they are horribly not aged correctly. Like they should look like babies. Like Tom Hanks shouldn't be in it, Tom Sizemore, pretty much all of them. The only one that's great is the guy who plays Upham, because he looks like he looks like an actual
18-year-old baby high schooler.
Everyone else too old. Great performances, great actors, too old.
Interesting.
Yeah. What are my other? I don't know. It's hard to pick. There's a lot of good ones that I really like. I feel like I have to just have watched it to think about it. unless I've mentioned it, I have to just to be like, oh yeah, and that one's good too.
Well, that's okay. That's great. Yeah. Thank you. Let's see. I have a few more questions. I guess I'm curious for anybody who's thinking about writing, directing, be it a short, be it a feature, be it a TV or a miniseries, or even just scenes, like if they're going to shoot scenes with friends, like to add to their reel and like they're targeting period pieces. Do you have any recommendations for just how to go about it, how to approach it?
Yeah. I would say if you're going to do period, you got to do your research, because if it's wrong and people who are into it are going to know. And that's like our biggest thing that we concern ourselves with is like, it's got to be accurate as possible. Like, I know there's sometimes it's like we got to fudge it a little because of budget, but you need to make it as good as possible, because of like normal people who they're not going to know. But if you're doing period, you want those history fans, and you want that audience to think your movie's good. Because and sometimes like they're not fair because they do pick at things and you're like, nobody cares about that. Like, isn't it horrible how women were treated? Like, instead of like, that patch isn't sewn on right. Like, no one cares about that. But I think we focus so much on getting it as accurate as possible so that we can, because we're on in our pieces, we're trying to honor those people who we're telling that story of. So we want to tell the best story we can for them. So I think that's would be my biggest tip. Just do a lot of research. I think research helps just in general to get your story, like even your characters, like how you were saying you went and you read that book and learn more about their story. I think those little details definitely help shine through. And if you're writing something, those details are key, because even like if it's just a line and like normal people won't know, the people who do know will like freak out. They're gonna be like, from this thing, they're referencing this thing in history that's real.
It's really exciting, and then it makes sense.
And make it compelling. Like my favorite quote, my husband says it all the time because his dad said it to him in film school. He's like, if you're gonna make it bad, make it short.
Oh my gosh.
My father-in-law is a very practical man.
I mean,
plus I think he was like, I don't want to watch it because you're gonna make me watch it.
You're gonna make it bad, make it short. Oh my gosh. Well, I guess better make it good then. Make them want more.
Exactly.
Make them want to see more.
Exactly. I was like, that's a dad thing to say.
Oh my gosh. I guess my last burning question that comes to mind is, as a filmmaker, what legacy would you like to leave looking back at your life 50 years from now?
That's a great question. I guess I don't think about my legacy. I think about telling the legacy of others. Like you've seen Rise Above WASP. That is, I want their legacy to shine. Oh, Kitty.
It woke up.
Oh, I had to close my door so my cats wouldn't come in. They'd be
Well, this one was already asleep on the chair and I forgot. So at one point I was like, is she still there? And I looked and I was like, yup, here it is. So my apologies for interrupting. It's better to pay attention to it than not.
I like cat interruptions.
Don't. So cute.
It's a big cat.
No, she's tubby. She's a good eater. But
I have one of those.
so less so your legacy is yourself, you're saying, but you want your films to be watched.
I want my films to be the legacy. I want the stories that I'm telling to keep being told. So even if they're not watching my films, I want those stories to be told in another way. Because the people who I'm telling the stories about are so important. They're so important to me, and I think they're important to everyone. And they're just not, their stories aren't, we tend to tell the story that the light isn't shown on as much. So I just don't want them to be forgotten about.
I like that.
That's the whole reason we make them in the first place. It's like they just did too great of a thing to be like, now you're just a note in a book somewhere, or like, which nobody would ever see. So
right.
Because film, I think as much as I love books and reading them, I think film has a bigger footprint and a bigger effect on people's emotions, because you can make that human connection by watching someone on screen. So
I agree. And, I used to be very, very, very gung-ho about reading and books, but like working with students with dyslexia, and I get to work with the privileged few who get to have help, not just with me, but in school, and have their accommodations. And like, what about all those people, 1/5 of the population who do not necessarily have those accommodations, have that help? Their visual literacy
Mhm.
might be much stronger
Yeah.
than their, actual like reading fluency. So
Yeah.
it is a powerful tool.
Like, I'm so excited. We talk about this all the time. I'm so excited to see what the little girls now, who they become, because
Right?
they have things like Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel and pop culture. Like, I never like I had Princess Leia, like, and that was kind of it. And even at that time, I didn't look at Princess Leia like, ooh, like, like, it was more like I have Barbies.
I know. I was just thinking, like, did I have anybody besides Barbie? Not really. I
Yeah,
love my Barbies.
I know, I do too. That's how I used to tell my stories. Like, that's how I
Yeah,
did my early filmmaking as a kid. I'd be like, and then
you're right. Those Barbies told a
here.
lot of stories.
They were my storytelling device. Or like I would just like, oh, now you're doing this. Now now you get in your
Yeah,
car.
yeah. It
Um,
just seems like representation is
it's so
the key
important.
to really getting through to people.
It is. And like, I think the only reason I gave up on being a director when I was younger was I was like, there's no way somebody's hiring me to do that. Like, I just was like, it's just not going to happen because I don't see other people that look like me getting hired. So I was like, might as well put my efforts somewhere else. So
Well, you're changing that now.
I'm trying. I love it. I want to do more. So hopefully more in the pipeline. But I love directing documentary. I do love doing those stories, but I had a blast doing The Resistance. So I'd like to do more narrative because it's just fun.
So last question then is, are you able to share any upcoming stories we might have? Even if
Oh. Well, I've mentioned the one before that we're working on is about the medical missionaries that went to China at the turn of the century, that story is pretty interesting. And then we're doing a short film for the National Aviation Hall of Fame about an astronaut slash air racer slash Top Gun person named Hoot Gibson, who's flown the space shuttle 5 times. And he was the guy who did the handshake when they had docked with Mir, the first docking of 2 spacecraft, and he shook the hand with the Russians and like
wow,
ended the
that's
Cold War.
interesting.
Yeah. He got a call from the president saying you single-handedly ended the Cold War because they did their in space handshake. So we're doing a 10-minute kind of giant screen experience piece for their museum. And I have a script that I've written that has been entered in festivals that is getting good feedback about the women air racers from 1929, which is I really want to make, but I know would cost a lot of money. So we are actively looking for starting down that road of finding a producer for that who can help us get funds for it. And I think, oh wait, I'm sure I have many others. I'm sure there are others. I know I have a list. We also have a series that we're working on that will be a web series about people who fly or do work in aviation as part of an educational program to help get more people interested in aviation. So we're going to like highlight air traffic control, engineers, pilots, artists, anybody who's into aviation, and it's going to be videos for social and website and part of their educational program that they're doing. So currently that is all. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other ones that we were trying to get developed, but we have a big board, a list of things that are dream projects, possibilities.
Okay, gotta write it down.
See, write it down.
Gotta write it down.
And it's hanging on the wall, so you can't not look at it.
Excellent. That's awesome. Well, Kara, this has been so educational for me, super interesting. I mean, your niche is what I want my niche to be. So
I love it.
you're an inspiration. Thank you so much for speaking with me. And I can't wait to see The Resistance.
I know. I'm so excited for everyone to see it. It's so good.
How long will it be?
I think it's running at 13 minutes right now. So
Awesome.
I've got my list of film festivals we're going to enter it into, including Edinburgh, which long shot, but
Yes.
we might all be going to Scotland together because if we're in, we're going.
Oh, if we're in, we're going. When is it? Do you know what time? Well, is that like, I mean,
I have
it's
to
not
look.
August. It's not the fringe.
Yeah, I don't remember. I'd have to look.
We'll sort it out.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll totally go with you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a
awesome.
bunch of London ones I've entered as well. So, or I'm going to enter. I have a list.
Hey,
We're
that'll be
going to Europe.
we're going to Europe.
Somehow I'm
Brilliant.
getting in somewhere.
Well, thank you for everything. And I really, really look forward to working with you and seeing our film.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you very much. This was fun.
Thank you. Until next time.